Hello, everyone. I'm back today, and I'm here to talk to you about a documentary called Another Body. So, Another Body follows a college student's search for answers and justice after she discovers deepfake pornography of herself circulating online. It was directed by Sophie Compton and Ruben Hamlin, and it releases in Toronto on October 20th. So, I went into this very intrigued because the concept just seems so interesting, right? Like when you think about, deepfake pornography, and then you also see about, especially in this AI kind of driven world that we live in. It's such an interesting concept, and I went in very intrigued. Now I'm going to tell you this. I'm sure there's some of these documentaries which can get boring. Even if the subject matter is really, really interesting, even if it's really well done, just by the nature of it kind of being a real story, there are points, and even fictional movies obviously have this, where it just gets a little bit slower, a little bit clunky, and you kind of lose a little bit of interest, right? Sometimes it's hard to, especially with documentaries, and obviously you see this all the time with real, like other types of film, where it just gets hard to kind of bring you back in. This documentary didn't have any of those problems. Like, the entire time, I could not take my eyes off the screen. I'm not lying. Like, I could not take my eyes off the screen. And, I would consider this a must-watch. Because this shows something, again, that we see kind of normalized in our culture with AI. You have deepfakes, people making, doing things like funny things with deepfakes. And, mimicking people's voices with deepfakes, or, Photoshop it, or like deep faking people's faces onto other bodies or whatever, right? Like, it's all this very like kind of normal funny thing, but then you see the dark side of it, right? Because everything with this bright side also has a dark side, and this documentary shows the dark side of that, right? It shows the real life effects, and I think that's what makes it so frightening and also interesting, because you see the hopelessness of not only finding these disturbing pictures, these disturbing videos. Like, you see this entire Pornhub account created for this person without any idea, all of which are just deepfake versions of her. And you also see the consequences on her own life and her own mental health and her friends' lives, right? When they realize how many people that this person that they were, this person who was doing it, how many people he had done this to, right? And so I think those are the things which make this just such an interesting documentary. And I don't want to spoil it by giving too much else away, but the hopelessness, and you feel that hopelessness when watching this, right? Like, this is bugging me. I'm gonna stop this. Yeah, there we go. Feel that hopelessness inside of you, and you're watching this and you're like, oh my God, this is awful. And again, I think if this was just told to you, maybe there would be a different perspective. The other thing that this does, which again, I think really adds to this documentary, and it adds to the message that this documentary is trying to send, is the two main victims were deepfaked the entire movie. To protect their identity, obviously, so people didn't know who they were. So, like, when they showed us things like the porn, or like showed us clip parts of like the porn or whatever that was her face was deepfaked onto, they re-deepfaked another face onto that, so they can protect her identity, right? They deepfaked, even when she's talking, they deepfaked her face with another person's face. Now, this is something which, because especially at the beginning, like I'll be honest with you, like, it looked a little bit off, and I was like, this is a little bit weird, especially something like the times when like they put her in full black background and then just her face. It looks a little bit off, right? But you don't think too much into it. You're like, okay, well, she's just a person, maybe her face is just naturally off, right? Like, that's not an unrealistic thing. And then she's like, no, I'm deepfaked. And then you're like, oh, damn. Then you're like, oh my God, because then, you're kind of like, this shows how real it is, right? And how easy it is to kind of do this, because they do it in such an effective way where you're watching this and you're like, I can't believe that's not a real person. Like, even pictures of her that they show, right? They're all deepfaked. Like, and you're like, imagine if you think this is real watching this documentary, imagine how easy it is to do it when you do it on something worse. And this could extend beyond porn, but in this case, it's about porn. And the soundtrack added to this as well. So newcomer composer Holland Andrews, and he is very, very new. He's done a few shorts and some other stuff, but relatively new. He did a great job setting the mood of this documentary, because I think the other thing that separated this documentary and made it so much better was the soundtrack, right? Or was the score, sorry. And there are documentaries and movies generally, again, I don't want to put this specifically in documentaries, but where you don't know what the tone is, right? And you're kind of not sure, or there's moments where it kind of feels like the story itself veers away from what the tone is supposed to be, right? And actually, I'll give you a movie example here, right? But you look at Endgame, and I think one of the weaknesses of Endgame, and I've said this multiple times, Avengers Endgame, is the tone is kind of lost, right? Like, it feels like it should be a sad movie, but then people making taco jokes, right? And there's just like, and even I don't think the score in Endgame actually helped at all with the tone. I think it was kind of all over the place and a little bit more in the background than even Infinity War's score was. I think one of the best parts of Infinity War was the score. And I think what this documentary does, and what Holland Andrews does amazingly, is keeps that tone consistent even when the story veers away, because the story does veer away from that from time to time, right? Like, they do go on little tangents or on little like side things, but the score kind of keeps it interesting. And I think, again, I'm going to use a very famous example here, but Jaws, right? Obviously the most iconic sound in Jaws is that kind of tense the tense shark music. I can't do it right now, but you know what I mean. And again, it's something which and I'm not comparing obviously on that level, but it's about the concept, right? It kind of keeps your brain as an audience member focused on the path ahead, right? And focused on what is the sound and what is the tone? What am I supposed to be feeling, thinking right now, right? It's like a cheat code to thinking. It's like, just whisper in my ear what I'm supposed to be thinking. And that's what it does. So again, that's something which I thought was really interesting. And obviously, again, if you're deep faking the victim so well that it looks real, that's got to be credit to you, because there's movies that do basic CGI that don't get it right, and you're doing something which, at least in theory, is a little bit more difficult, especially to do for 1.5-ish hours, 1 hour 45 minutes, or whatever the movie actually ended up being in runtime. But honestly, this documentary was something unlike anything I'd ever seen. I honestly think it's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. And again, it is a concept which feels so sci-fi thriller-esque, but it's real. And so I think that's going to make it kind of stay with me long after I finished watching it. That's why I think everyone should go watch it on October 20th when it comes out, because it is truly something which will stick with you and will kind of make you reconsider a lot of this internet culture and AI. And even when you look at the consequences for celebrities being deepfaked, right? Like, we don't obviously see those consequences very often, but it is something which we have to think about. And I think this documentary does another good job, obviously, of doing that as well. Honestly, I think I'd probably give this like a 9 out of 10. I really have no complaints about it. I would recommend everyone go watch it.